The late summer sun slanted low across the county fairgrounds, draping everything in golden light. The air smelled of fried dough, popcorn, and sticky cotton candy, a sweet haze that made the heat feel almost pleasant. Kids darted between carnival rides, laughing as the Ferris wheel creaked overhead, and parents trailed behind, balancing soda cups and paper bags filled with prizes. Somewhere, a radio blasted country music, just faint enough that it felt like background to the murmurs and squeals of the crowd. Officer Mark Ellery adjusted his uniform shirt nervously, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. K9 Ranger, his German Shepherd partner, stood at attention beside him. Every muscle in the dog's body was taut, ears perked, tail stiff, eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk. Ranger had a reputation. He was efficient, disciplined, and never, ever let a situation get the better of him. Today was supposed to be simple. A friendly meet and greet at the county fair, kids posing for pictures, parents patting Ranger on the head, a bit of good PR for the department. Mark glanced around, checking the surroundings. The fair was bigger than he remembered, sprawling over several fields with colorful tents, a patchwork of games, and the smell of fried food everywhere. The sheriff's booth was set up near the parking lot, and a small stage hosted a local band whose drums rattled through the ground like distant thunder. Everything looked normal, too normal. Then he noticed her. A tiny figure stepping through the crowd, barefoot, dressed dusty and frayed at the hem, hair tangled into loose curls. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, scanning the crowd with a seriousness that made Mark's chest tighten. She didn't laugh at the carnival games, didn't run toward the rides, didn't even seem interested in the candy stalls. She just walked, eyes fixed forward. When she reached Ranger, she froze. The German Shepherd stiffened as well, muscles locked, ears upright. Officer Ellery knelt to her level, smiling, trying to be friendly. "Hey there, little lady," he said gently. "Want to meet Ranger?" The girl's eyes flicked to him, then back to the dog. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She simply lifted a tiny finger and pointed at Ranger. "He remembers," she whispered. Mark froze. His blood ran cold even though he tried to rationalize it. Remembers what? Ranger's ears twitched. His tail stopped moving. And then, to Mark's shock, the dog growled. Not a playful bark or a warning bark. This was a low, guttural growl that resonated in Mark's chest. He had worked with Ranger for nearly a decade, and he had never, not once, heard him make that sound at a child. The crowd around them seemed oblivious. Parents continued walking by, distracted by cotton candy and carnival lights, but Mark felt a wave of unease that made his stomach knot. "Who remembers what?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The girl tilted her head slightly, lips trembling. "He saw him," she said. "Saw who?" Mark pressed, but the girl didn't answer. Instead, Ranger jerked violently toward the cornfield that ran along the edge of the fairgrounds. It was dense and tall, a green wall that no one dared enter. But Ranger was pulling, growling, barking, a storm contained in fur and teeth. The girl's hand tightened around Mark's pant leg. "He's still out there," she whispered, her voice quivering. Mark's heart pounded. The fair should have been a safe, predictable place. Kids laughing, rides spinning, music floating through the air. Instead, a little girl was talking about someone unknown and dangerous, and Ranger, trained, calm, unshakable Ranger, was acting like he was facing something from his worst nightmares. He glanced around for other officers. Most were busy at the rides or talking with parents. He grabbed his radio, fumbling with it. "Unit 3, we may have a possible situation near the cornfield," he muttered. The static crackled back, vague and distant, giving him little comfort. The girl tugged harder. "Come on," she said, almost pleading, "before he sees us." Mark swallowed hard. His instincts screamed caution, but the urgency in her voice, the certainty, was impossible to ignore. He nodded slowly, kneeling to her height. "Okay, we'll check it out, but you have to stay close to me." She nodded, gripping his hand like it was a lifeline. The cornfield loomed ahead, tall stalks rustling in the faint breeze. Shadows danced between the rows as if the plants themselves were alive, moving toward them. Ranger darted ahead, weaving through the stalks with purpose, barking occasionally but never straying from the path. Mark followed, the girl clinging to his arm, her small feet brushing against the dirt and grass. The world narrowed. Gone was the carnival noise. Gone was the smell of fried dough and popcorn. The sun filtered weakly through the corn, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to stretch toward them, reaching, waiting. "Your mom," Mark said cautiously, crouching slightly to her height. "Where did you last see your mom?" The girl hesitated, a shiver running through her tiny frame. Her lips quivered. "She told me to hide," she whispered, "when he came back." Mark froze. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Who came back? What man? The girl's eyes darted around the shadows, wide and fearful. The man who took her. Mark's mind raced. A missing person case. A dangerous fugitive. A child pointing to a dog and talking about remembers. Nothing in his years of police work had prepared him for this. Ranger barked again, a sharp, commanding sound that reverberated in the air. He had stopped at a particular row, teeth bared, eyes fixed ahead. Mark crouched lower, tightening his grip on the girl's hand. Then the sound came. A scream not from the fair, not a child's laugh, but a high-pitched, terrified scream from somewhere deep in the cornfield. The girl's small body tensed in Mark's arms. "He's here," she whispered, eyes wide with fear. Mark's heart pounded like a drum. Every instinct screamed to retreat, but something in the girl's tone, the dog's behavior, the way the air seemed charged around them, told him they were too late. Something had already happened, and they were walking straight into it. The stalks rustled violently, as if the corn itself was warning them back. Ranger growled, and this time Mark could feel it more than hear it, a deep, almost human resonance that vibrated in his chest. Mark swallowed hard and whispered to the girl, "Stay behind me, okay?" She nodded, biting her lip. Her eyes never left the rows ahead, fixed on something unseen but horrifying. And in that moment, as they stepped forward, the fairgrounds faded into a distant echo behind them, leaving only the rustling corn, a growling dog, and the tiny voice that had said two words no one could forget. "He remembers." Mark's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears as the cornfield swallowed them. The sunlight from the fairgrounds faded behind the thick stalks, replaced by long, wavering shadows that twisted with every breeze. Ranger, tense as a drawn bow, had stopped a few feet ahead, teeth bared and ears erect. His growl was low, vibrating through Mark's chest, and it was unlike anything he had ever heard from the dog. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. The little girl, Emily, clutched his uniform shirt, digging her tiny fingers into the fabric. She trembled violently, but her eyes never left Ranger. "He remembers," she whispered again, her voice barely audible, trembling with something Mark couldn't quite place. Fear, yes, but something deeper, something like dread. Mark swallowed hard, forcing his racing thoughts into focus. Remembers what? Emily? Who did he see? Emily shook her head, her curls bouncing wildly. "Not me," she whispered. "Ranger, he saw him before, long ago." Mark's mind raced. Ranger had been on hundreds of cases, seen countless suspects, but his growl, his posture, the way his hackles raised, this was different. Something had triggered a memory, a primal alert. And Emily, she wasn't making this up. A sudden rustling echoed from deeper in the corn. The stalks shook violently, as if something large was moving through them. Ranger barked sharply, then lunged forward, growling with lethal precision. "Ranger, wait!" Mark shouted, but the leash slipped through his hands. The dog vanished into the green maze like a shadow. Emily screamed, "Wait!" Mark bolted after Ranger, forcing Emily to cling to his arm as he pushed through the dense stalks. The ground beneath them was uneven, the dirt soft and treacherous, roots and weeds snaring his boots. He could barely see beyond the next row, but Ranger's barking echoed ahead, sharp and commanding. "Where did he go?" Mark muttered, panic rising. Emily's voice was barely audible, trembling. "He's over there." She pointed to a patch where the corn grew thicker, darker. The light from the fatting sun barely penetrated. "He's hiding." Mark slowed for a moment, catching his breath, and looked at her. "Emily, who's hiding?" But before she could answer, a sudden sound ripped through the cornfield. A scream, high-pitched, terrified. Emily's eyes widened. She clutched Mark's hand tighter, her nails digging into his skin. "He's here," she whispered. "The man, he's here." Mark's stomach sank. Missing persons, a fugitive, Ranger acting like he had known this man before. And now, Emily saying the words that made every hair on his body stand on end. "He's here." A shadow shifted ahead. Mark tensed, reaching instinctively for his sidearm. Ranger barked furiously, circling, snapping the air. And then the shadow moved again, a tall figure hunched slightly, weaving through the corn. Mark's throat went dry. "Stop, police!" he shouted. The figure froze, as if the words had caught him mid-step. But then he started laughing, low, guttural, uneven laughter that sent chills down Mark's spine. It was the laugh of someone who had lived too long in the dark, someone who had nothing left to lose. Emily whimpered, pressing herself against Mark's chest. He took her," she whispered. Her small voice, barely audible, sent a shiver through Mark. "My mom, he kept her." Mark's pulse hammered in his ears. "Your mom is alive." Emily nodded, tears spilling down her dirt-streaked face. "Yes, but he's dangerous." Ranger growled again, low and deliberate. The dog's body tensed as though ready to spring, yet Mark couldn't move forward. Every instinct screamed danger, and yet he couldn't leave Emily or her mother in the hands of someone who had already done unspeakable things. Suddenly, the figure lurched forward, sprinting toward a darker section of the corn. Ranger barked once, then bolted, disappearing into the shadows. Mark tightened his grip on Emily. "Stay behind me," he shouted, fumbling with the radio on his shoulder. "Unit 3 officer in pursuit, suspect sighted in cornfield, emergency." Static hissed back, but no immediate response. Mark's chest tightened. Backup was far away. It would take minutes in which the man could vanish into the endless rows. Emily tugged at his sleeve. "Hurry, please." Mark pushed through the stalks, his heart racing. Every step was met with rustling, the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filling his nose. Ranger's barks echoed, then cut off suddenly. A sudden silence fell over the cornfield, so intense it made Mark's ears ring. "Ranger," he called, panic rising. Emily clutched his chest, trembling violently. He's waiting," she whispered, her voice quivering with fear that Mark could feel as if it were his own. Mark's gut twisted. Something was coming, something they hadn't seen yet. He could sense it, an almost predatory patience in the silence, a quiet that pressed on his chest like a weight. Then, without warning, a hand shot out from behind a stalk, grabbing Emily by the shoulder. She screamed, flailing, and Mark reacted instantly, tackling the intruder to the ground. The figure twisted violently, striking Mark across the face, and the world erupted into chaos. Mark fought to restrain the man, but he was fast, too strong, fueled by a feral desperation. He could hear Ranger barking furiously somewhere in the shadows, teeth snapping at the man's heels. Emily's terrified cries filled the air, mingling with the dog's growls and the man's guttural snarls. Mark's training kicked in, every muscle tensing. He remembered every drill, every restraint technique, but instinct alone wasn't enough. The man was unpredictable, desperate, dangerous. And yet the flashes of something familiar struck Mark, a glimpse of the face, dirt-streaked and wild, eyes haunted but unmistakable. Mark froze, horrified recognition hitting him like a sledgehammer. It was him, the suspect from the county's most notorious missing persons case, a man who had vanished 7 years ago after abducting Emily's mother. Ranger had been part of the team investigating that case, part of the K-9 unit that tracked the man before he disappeared. And now, here he was in the flesh, alive. Emily's voice trembled behind him. He knows I'm here." The man snarled, lunging again. Ranger's bark echoed from the shadows, closer now, a warning growl that froze the man mid-strike. Mark saw the recognition in the suspect's eyes, the same fear Ranger had shown. And then Emily whispered, her tiny voice barely audible. "My mom, she's alive. He kept her here." Mark's heart stopped. Somewhere in the cornfield, hidden, Emily's mother waited, alive, but trapped, threatened, possibly just feet away. And before he could react, Ranger barked again, this time louder, urgent, as if demanding Mark to follow. Mark glanced at Emily. Her eyes were wide with terror and hope. "We have to find her," he said, voice tight with emotion. "Now." He pushed forward, deeper into the corn, the shadows growing longer, the stalks bending like silent sentinels. Every rustle, every whisper of the wind could hide danger. Every step brought them closer to the unknown, to the man, to Emily's mother, and to a truth that no one could have expected. The cornfield seemed endless. Ranger barked again, just ahead, and Mark realized he was the only thing standing between Emily, her mother, and a man who had already shown he would do anything to keep his secrets buried. And in that moment, Mark knew nothing would ever be the same. The scream echoed again, louder this time, closer, and then stopped. Mark froze, heart hammering. Ranger growled low, throat vibrating. Emily clutched his shirt, eyes wide with terror. Something or someone was moving in the corn behind them. Mark pushed through the thick stalks of corn, Emily clinging to his side, each step leaving them deeper in the green maze. Ranger's barking had grown frantic, echoing like an alarm through the tall rows. The shadows stretched long, turning the cornfield into a labyrinth that seemed to twist and move with each step. Every rustle made Mark's pulse spike. Every snapped stalk sounded like a footstep, a warning, a threat. Then they broke through into a small clearing near the edge of the fairgrounds, and the world changed again. A truck sat there, abandoned, crooked in the gravel. Its driver's side door hung open, swinging lazily in the breeze, scraping the metal frame. The paint was scratched and dulled, dust covering the windshield. But it wasn't just a random vehicle. Something about it made Mark's stomach churn. Emily froze in his arms, eyes wide. "There, that's it. That's where he went," she whispered. Mark's jaw tightened. He slowly approached, every muscle tensed, scanning the vehicle for movement. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and something coppery, blood. He stepped closer and saw it. A single, bloodied glove lying on the driver's seat. Its red streaks glinted in the weak sunlight, stark against the faded fabric. He could feel the bile rise in his throat. Emily's small voice trembled. "My mom's in there," she said, barely above a whisper. Mark froze in the truck. She shook her head violently. "No, he kept her in the corn somewhere." Her words faltered, fear and memory colliding. Mark looked back at the cornfield. Every stalk seemed to bend and sway unnaturally, almost as if warning him not to proceed. Ranger appeared suddenly from the corn, teeth bared, fur bristling. He growled low in his throat, not at Mark, not at Emily, but something deeper, something Mark couldn't yet see. "Ranger, what is it?" Mark whispered, tension vibrating through him. Ranger didn't answer. He just charged forward again, deeper into the corn. Mark grabbed Emily, pulling her close. "Stay with me," he said firmly, voice tight with urgency. They followed Ranger, crashing through the tall stalks, the world narrowing to just the dog, the girl, and the shadows stretching toward them. Every snapped stalk, every rustle made Mark flinch, but he couldn't stop. He had to keep moving. Suddenly a scream shattered the tense silence. A woman's scream, high-pitched, desperate. Emily gasped. "Mom!" Mark's heart stopped. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the sound, Emily in his arms, every step a battle against roots and mud and exhaustion. The scream echoed again, bouncing off the endless green walls, but the source remained hidden. Ranger barked ahead, sharp and commanding, leading them forward like a phantom guide. They reached another clearing, smaller this time, just enough light to see broken brush and old farming equipment scattered across the dirt. Mark set Emily down gently, scanning for movement. His eyes caught a shadow, a figure crouched low behind a pile of debris. "Freeze!" Mark shouted, hand on his gun. The figure flinched. It was a man, disheveled, face streaked with dirt and grime, eyes wide with panic and recognition. He tried to bolt, but Ranger lunged, teeth snapping inches from the man's arm. The man stumbled back, hitting the ground hard. Mark rushed forward, gun trained on him. "Step away from her," he barked, voice cracking with urgency. Emily's small voice rang out. "He's the man, he's the one who took her." Mark's stomach dropped. This wasn't just any fugitive. This was the man responsible for Emily's mother's disappearance 7 years ago. Ranger's hackles were raised, body rigid, growling like a predator who had tracked its quarry for years and finally cornered it. The man scrambled to his feet, wild-eyed. "You don't understand," he shouted, voice raw and panicked. She's. Mark didn't wait for an explanation. "Stay down," he shouted again, taking a step forward. Emily pressed against him, shivering violently. The man's gaze flicked toward the distant rows of corn. You can't take her," he shouted, pointing toward the far edge of the field. "She's mine." Mark's pulse thundered. "Your mother," Emily cried, tears streaming down her face. The man's expression twisted with fear, rage, and desperation. He backed toward a dark opening in the cornfield, something hidden among the stalks that Mark couldn't yet see. Ranger barked furiously, growling low in the throat, stepping forward like a shadow incarnate. Then just as suddenly, the man bolted, darting toward the darkness of the corn rows. Ranger chased him instantly, barking, snapping, muscles rippling. Mark grabbed Emily, yanking her behind him as he ran after them. The cornfield swallowed them once more. Shadows pressed close, stalks whipping against their faces, roots tripping their feet. Ranger's barks echoed from somewhere ahead. Then silence. Emily clutched Mark's arm, trembling. He knows we're here," she whispered. Mark's chest tightened. He didn't answer. Something about the way Ranger had stopped, ears perked, body tense, sent a chill through him. Ranger wasn't barking at the man anymore. He was focused on something else, something unseen. A low rustle came from the stalks behind them. Mark spun, gun raised, heart hammering. Nothing, just the wind, or so he hoped. Emily gasped, pointing. "There, behind the corn." Mark followed her gaze and froze. The corn stalks bent unnaturally, as if hiding something massive. Ranger growled, teeth bared, moving closer. Then the ground shifted. A mound of dirt, barely visible through the stalks, began to collapse, and a voice, weak and hoarse, whispered through the green shadows. "Emily!" Mark's stomach dropped. Emily's eyes went wide. "Mom," she whispered. Ranger barked once, sharply, growling low, pawing at the earth. Mark didn't need further proof. Somewhere, hidden just beneath the surface, was the woman who had been missing for years. Alive. Mark took a deep breath, gun still drawn, scanning every shadow. The man, her captor, was still out there. They weren't safe, not yet. And in that moment, a faint sound caught Mark's attention. A movement from deeper in the corn, deliberate, watching, waiting. Something or someone was tracking them. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Every instinct screamed. Danger was close, closer than they realized. Ranger growled, eyes fixed, muscles coiled like springs. Emily clung to him, terrified, whispering her mother's name. Mark knew one thing for certain. The nightmare wasn't over, not by a long shot. And then the man's voice echoed from the darkness of the cornfield. "You shouldn't have come back." Mark froze. Emily pressed against his chest, trembling violently. Ranger growled, a deep, guttural warning. The air around them seemed to tighten, suffocating, as if the corn itself held its breath. And in that moment, no one was ready for what would happen next. The cornfield seemed to close in around them like a living, breathing maze. Stalks bent and rustled, brushing Mark's face and arms as he pushed forward, Emily clinging tightly to his side. Ranger ran ahead, teeth bared, low growl vibrating through the air, every muscle coiled as if ready to spring on unseen prey. The sounds of the fair, the music, laughter, and carnival chaos, had long vanished, replaced by the eerie quiet of the green maze, punctuated only by Ranger's sharp barks and the crunch of their boots on damp dirt. Mark's pulse pounded as he tried to orient himself. Every row looked identical, stretching into shadowy infinity, the sun slanting low and casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Emily pressed her face against his chest, trembling. "Mom, is she okay?" she whispered, voice barely audible. Mark swallowed hard. I think so," he said cautiously, though his gut twisted. "We're going to find her, we have to." Emily nodded, biting her lip, eyes wide as she scanned the rows around them. Then she froze, pointing ahead. "There, I saw him." Mark followed her gaze. A shadow shifted between the stalks, a figure hunched slightly, moving with unnatural stealth. His heart tightened. It was him, the man who had taken her mother, alive after 7 years of nightmares, now stalking the green maze like a predator. "Ranger!" Mark shouted. The dog barked once, then darted forward with lethal precision. Mark grabbed Emily, pulling her closer as he ran. The stalks whipped against his arms, snagged his clothes, and left red scratches along his skin, but there was no time to notice. Every instinct screamed danger. They crashed through the dense rows, chasing Ranger's barking and the man's shadow, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying corn leaves. Emily clung to Mark's side, her small hands gripping his shirt like a lifeline. The man stumbled into a small clearing, and Mark could see him more clearly now. Disheveled, dirt-streaked, eyes wide and wild, he had a manic energy that made Mark's blood run cold. He glanced over his shoulder and spotted Emily, his lips twisted into a feral grin. "Little Emily," he hissed, voice low and guttural, "you shouldn't have come back." Emily gasped, pressing herself closer to Mark. "He's the one who took my mom," she whispered. Mark tightened his grip on her, scanning the surrounding cornfield. Every instinct screamed that the man was dangerous, unpredictable, and desperate. Ranger growled low, circling ahead, teeth bared. The man's grin faltered as he saw Ranger. You were there," he muttered, eyes narrowing. "You remember." Mark's pulse spiked. Something clicked into place. Ranger wasn't just chasing him. The dog remembered this man. Not like a stranger, not like any suspect, they had crossed paths before. Ranger's growl deepened, reverberating through Mark's chest. Emily whispered, trembling, He knows Ranger remembers." Before Mark could react, the man lunged toward them, sprinting through the clearing with unnatural speed. Ranger was on him in an instant, teeth snapping, body colliding with his in a cloud of dust and rustling stalks. Mark spun, gun drawn, trying to anticipate the chaos. Emily screamed behind him, gripping his arm. The man and Ranger crashed to the ground, grappling in a blur of limbs and fur. Mark's training kicked in, every muscle tensed. He rushed forward, but the man twisted violently, narrowly avoiding the gun barrel, his eyes wild and desperate. "Step away," Mark shouted. "Let her go." The man's expression shifted, a flicker of fear flashing across his face as he glanced at Emily. She's mine," he spat, backing toward a darker part of the cornfield. Emily gasped, "Mom, she's alive." Mark felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. Somewhere in the labyrinthine corn, her mother waited, but they weren't safe. Not yet. Ranger barked furiously, snapping again at the man's heels, holding him at bay. The man's breath came in ragged gasps, panic and rage mixing in a dangerous cocktail. He backed into a row of dense corn, disappearing partially from view. Ranger followed, growling low. Mark grabbed Emily, pulling her along, moving through the stalks as quickly as he could. Each step brought a fresh wave of adrenaline. The cornfield seemed alive, shadows shifting, hiding unseen threats masking the man's movements. Mark's mind raced. Every step had to be precise. Every rustle could mean attack. Every second counted. Then abruptly Ranger stopped. His body stiffened, ears high, tail rigid. He growled not at the man, but at something else, something unseen, moving in the shadows beyond them. Mark froze, holding Emily close. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Ranger's growl deepened, a low, warning vibration that made the hair on Mark's arms rise. Emily's small voice trembled. "Something's there behind us." Mark spun slowly, scanning the green walls. The corn seemed to bend unnaturally, shadows thickening. Every nerve in his body screamed danger. The man, the captor, wasn't the only threat here. Something else was lurking, watching, waiting. Suddenly a movement, a rustle far to the right. Mark aimed, heart hammering, gun shaking slightly. Ranger barked sharply, racing toward the sound. Emily pressed against him, eyes wide with terror. A low scream echoed, cut short. Emily gasped, clutching Mark's shirt. "Mom!" Mark's stomach dropped. They were close, so close. And yet danger pressed in from every direction. He could see a small mound of earth partially hidden by corn stalks, a makeshift cellar door barely visible. His gut screamed at him. That had to be it. That had to be where her mother was. He crouched, whispering to Emily, "Stay here, don't move. Ranger and I are going to get her." Emily nodded, trembling violently. "Please hurry." Mark took a deep breath, signaling Ranger. The dog growled in acknowledgement, then pressed forward, nose to the ground. The air grew thick, heavy with the smell of damp earth and rot. Every rustle of stalks sounded like a whisper of threat, every shadow a potential ambush. The man's voice floated through the corn, low, mocking, dangerous. "You can't take her, not again." Mark froze, Ranger growled, ears perked. The sound of the man's footstep echoed, then stopped. Silence, too much silence. Then the ground shifted slightly near the cellar door. A faint creak, almost like a whisper of movement. Emily's mother's voice cracked through the air. "Emily." Emily gasped, pressing her face into Mark's chest. "Mom," she whispered. Mark's heart thudded. Somewhere beneath that mound of earth, the woman who had been missing for 7 years waited. Alive. But the man, the captor, was still out there, watching, dangerous, unpredictable. And in that instant, Mark knew, the nightmare wasn't over, not by a long shot. Ranger growled again, low and menacing, pawing at the earth. The cornfield seemed to hold its breath. Mark glanced at Emily, who was trembling violently. "We're almost there," he whispered, voice tight with urgency. A shadow shifted behind the corn. The man's laugh, low and chilling, echoed through the stalks. "You shouldn't have come back." Mark froze. Emily clutched him. Ranger growled. The air tightened, suffocating. And in that moment, no one was ready for what would happen next. The cornfield was alive with whispers, stalks swaying unnaturally, shadows twisting in the dim sunlight that filtered through the thick green maze. Ranger's growls echoed, deep and warning, vibrating in Mark's chest. Every instinct in Mark's body screamed danger, but he pressed forward, Emily clinging to his arm, her tiny hands white-knuckled around his sleeve. "Mom," Emily's voice trembled, fragile as porcelain. "Mom." The sound came again, fainter this time, a weak, cracked voice buried beneath the earth and brush. Mark felt a jolt, a mix of relief and panic. Somewhere close, her mother waited, alive after 7 years of nightmares. And yet the man, the captor, was still out there, somewhere in the shadows. Mark crouched low, trying to peer through the stalks. Ranger growled, low and guttural, pawing at the ground near a nearly hidden mound of earth. There it was, the small, makeshift cellar door Emily had pointed to earlier. Rusted hinges, covered in dirt and debris, as if nature itself had tried to swallow it whole. Emily gasped. "Mom's in there, she's alive." Mark's pulse thundered. "We'll get her, Emily, I promise." He glanced toward the shadows of the cornfield. The man could be anywhere, watching, waiting, ready to strike. Every instinct told Mark this was a trap. And then a voice slithered through the air, low and menacing. "Little Emily, You really shouldn't have come back." Mark froze. The words sent ice through his veins. The man had been waiting, anticipating them, manipulating the shadows like a predator in a cage. Emily whimpered, pressing closer. He's going to hurt us," she whispered. Mark tightened his grip on his gun, slowly scanning the rows. Ranger circled ahead, hackles raised, eyes locked on a shadow moving just beyond the mound. The man stepped forward into a small shaft of light, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, eyes wild, body coiled with nervous energy. "You can't take her," he hissed, gesturing toward the mound. "She's mine, she's always been mine." Mark's stomach twisted. 7 years. 7 years of terror, unanswered questions, and hope. And now this man was standing between them and the woman they had been searching for all this time. "Let her go," Mark shouted. "It's over." The man laughed, a low, ragged sound that carried the weight of insanity and desperation. He lunged toward the mound, faster than Mark could react. Ranger intercepted him instantly, teeth snapping inches from his arm, growling like a creature born to hunt. The man twisted, fighting the dog with a raw, desperate strength. Mark fired a warning shot, the sound cracking through the cornfield like a gunshot in a tomb. The man froze, eyes wide with fear for the first time in years. Emily gasped, "Mom." Mark ignored the fear clawing at his chest. He ran to the mound, hands moving over the dirt and brush. The makeshift door resisted at first, but he pried at it with every ounce of strength, dirt crumbling beneath his fingers. A weak voice called again from below. "Emily, is that you?" Tears sprang to Emily's eyes. "Mom," she cried, scrambling forward. Mark moved aside, giving Emily space as Ranger barked furiously, keeping the captor pinned. The dog's growl was relentless, and the man's eyes flicked to it, panic and frustration mixing in a dangerous cocktail. Mark finally pried open the cellar door. A cloud of musty, damp air escaped, carrying with it the scent of years trapped underground. Emily's mother lay curled beneath the boards, pale and thin, but alive. Her eyes fluttered open, locking on her daughter's small face. "Emily," she whispered, voice hoarse and broken. "Mom," Emily cried, rushing forward. Mark caught her just before she stumbled into the dark opening. Mark descended carefully, arms shielding both women. "It's okay," he said, voice steady despite the chaos around him. "You're safe now." But the man wasn't done. He scrambled to his feet, pushing through the stalks, rage and desperation fueling him. "You can't take her from me," he shouted. Ranger barked, snapping at his heels, teeth flashing in the dim light. The man stumbled, lunging forward, trying to grab Emily's mother as she crawled toward the surface. Mark fired another shot into the dirt near the man's feet. The sound echoed like thunder through the cornfield. The man froze, eyes wild, then bolted, sprinting deeper into the maze. Mark's chest heaved as he helped Emily's mother up. She was thin, fragile, but her grip on her daughter was iron strong. "We have to move," Mark said urgently. "Now." Emily clung to her mother, sobbing. Ranger stayed alert, scanning the cornfield, growling low, ready for any sudden movement. Then the rustling began again, closer this time, deliberate. The man had doubled back, waiting for another chance. Mark cursed under his breath. "He's not finished," he muttered. "We have to get out of here before he. Emily's mother pressed close to him, shaking. He knows this field better than anyone," she whispered. "He's been here before, hiding." Mark's stomach sank. The labyrinth of corn seemed endless, each row a potential ambush. Every rustle could mask a step, every shadow could hide the man, waiting for them to make a mistake. Ranger barked sharply, ears perked. The dog had sensed it, something worse than the man. Something lingering in the shadows, hidden, watching. Emily clutched Mark's shirt. "He's coming back," she whispered, voice shaking with terror. Mark's mind raced. They had found her mother, but escape was far from guaranteed. The man was dangerous, unpredictable, and now fully aware of their position. And the cornfield, it wasn't just a maze. It was a trap, alive with unseen threats, every stalk bending like it had its own intent, every shadow a potential ambush. Mark looked at Ranger, then at Emily and her mother. "Stay close, stay quiet, and whatever happens, stay behind me," he said, voice steady but tight. Ranger growled again, low and menacing, pawing at the earth near the hidden cellar. The man's voice echoed from deeper in the corn. "You shouldn't have come back." Mark froze. Emily pressed herself against him. Ranger growled. The air tightened, thick and suffocating. Something moved in the shadows behind them, deliberate, watching, waiting. And in that instant, Mark knew that no one, neither the family nor the officers, was ready for what was coming next. Mark's lungs burned as he pushed through the maze of corn stalks, Emily clinging to his side, her small hands gripping his shirt like a lifeline. Ranger ran ahead, a taut blur of muscle and instinct, growling low and snapping at shadows. The hidden cellar had revealed Emily's mother, pale, fragile, yet alive, a miracle that came with the terrifying knowledge that the captor was still out there. Mark's pulse pounded in his ears. Every rustle, every whisper of the corn was a warning. Somewhere the man lurked, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Mark's gun felt heavy in his hand, but he knew it wasn't just the man he had to fear. There was something else in this cornfield, a sense of menace lurking in every shadow. "Mom," Emily whispered, voice trembling. Her mother clutched her hand, holding her tight, still weak but alive. "I'm here, baby," she whispered back, her voice fragile but full of relief. "I'm here." Mark's eyes scanned the endless rows. Then he saw it, a small clearing up ahead. Sunlight broke through the thick canopy, illuminating the area in harsh, golden beams, but it wasn't safe. The clearing was unnatural, almost staged, as if the man had prepared it. Twigs and dirt had been scattered, forming signs of movement. Footprints crisscrossed the ground, some fresh, some older. Mark's stomach twisted. "We're not alone," he muttered, voice low. Ranger growled again, warning. From the shadows at the edge of the clearing, the man emerged. Disheveled, dirt-streaked, eyes wild and haunted. His grin was feral, twisted with desperation. "Didn't expect her to find me again, did you?" Emily gasped, pressing against her mother. "Mom, he's coming." Mark stepped protectively in front of them, gun raised. "It's over, step back." The man's grin faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by fear, a rare human fear he hadn't shown in years. She's mine," he spat. "I've kept her all this time." Mark's heart pounded. Years of nightmares, missing person cases, unanswered questions, and now they were all converging in this clearing. Ranger barked furiously, growling low, circling the man. The captor lunged, eyes wild, desperation fueling his strength. Ranger intercepted instantly, teeth snapping, body colliding with the man. The man stumbled, cursed, and tried to fight the dog off with frantic punches. Mark fired a warning shot, echoing through the clearing. The man froze, eyes wide with panic. Ranger's growl intensified, and the dog lunged again, keeping him pinned. Emily's mother reached out to Emily, holding her tight. "Stay behind me," she whispered. The man scrambled to his feet and backed toward the shadows of the corn. "You don't understand," he shouted. She's mine." Mark's mind raced. Every training exercise, every protocol, none of it could prepare him for this moment. Ranger held the man at bay, teeth flashing, eyes locked. The dog wasn't just guarding, they were connected. 7 years ago, Ranger had been there, had remembered this man, had survived encounters no human could recall fully. Emily whispered, almost to herself, "He remembers too." Mark's jaw tightened. He realized Ranger's growl wasn't just a warning. It was a recognition of every crime, every deception, every terror this man had inflicted. The man lunged again, faster this time, desperate. Ranger snapped at him, and Mark fired another shot into the dirt near his feet. The man stumbled, panic overtaking rage, and for a brief moment Mark saw vulnerability, weakness, the man's first hint of fear in years. Emily's mother moved slowly, helping Emily toward the edge of the clearing. "Go," she whispered, "get to safety." Mark signaled Ranger. The dog barked sharply, then bolted after the man, snapping and growling, forcing him back into the cornfield. The clearing was tense, silent except for Ranger's low growl and the distant rustle of stalks. Then a faint sound reached Mark's ears. A noise that wasn't the man, wasn't Ranger, something else. Movement behind them. Mark spun, gun ready. The corn stalks shifted, something large, deliberate, watching. He felt the air tighten around him, oppressive, suffocating. Every instinct screamed that they weren't alone. Ranger barked furiously, snapping at the air, sensing the same threat. Emily clutched Mark's shirt. "It's coming back," she whispered, trembling violently. Mark's pulse spiked. They had rescued her mother, but escape was far from guaranteed. The man's desperation, combined with the hidden dangers of this cornfield, made the situation a ticking time bomb. One wrong move, and the nightmare could return in an instant. Ranger growled, circling, eyes locked on the shadows. The man's voice echoed faintly from deeper in the corn. "You shouldn't have come back." Mark knew they had no time. They needed to move, to get Emily and her mother out of this living maze before the captor could regain his footing, and before whatever else lurked in the cornfield decided to strike. He took a deep breath. "Stay close, stay quiet," he whispered to Emily and her mother, "and whatever happens, stay behind me." Ranger barked one final warning, low and menacing. The man's voice echoed again, fatting but chilling. "You'll never leave alive." Mark felt the weight of those words. The cornfield wasn't just hiding the captor, it was alive with unseen threats, every stalk bending, every shadow hiding danger. They were far from safe. And in that moment Mark knew one truth. The nightmare was far from over. The cornfield seemed to pulse with life, each stalk whispering threats, each shadow hiding danger. Mark's breath came in sharp bursts as he pushed Emily and her mother forward, their small hands clutching his tightly. Ranger circled ahead, tense, teeth bared, eyes locked on the man who had terrorized their lives for years. The clearing behind them offered no safety. Every rustle, every crack of stalks could signal the captor's return. The man, disheveled, wild-eyed, desperate, was still out there, somewhere in the twisting rows, watching, planning. Mark's gut twisted. They had rescued her mother, but the danger was far from over. Every instinct screamed that a confrontation was inevitable. Suddenly, a shadow burst from the corn. The man sprinted toward them, arms flailing, rage and panic twisted on his dirt-streaked face. "You'll never leave," he shouted, voice raw and threatening. Ranger barked, lunging instantly, teeth snapping. The dog collided with the man, tackling him to the ground. The corn around them exploded with noise, stalks snapped, dirt flew, leaves rustled violently. Ranger held him at bay, growling low, snapping with precision, muscles coiled like springs. Mark reacted instantly, sprinting forward, gun drawn. Emily's mother pressed herself against him, holding Emily close. "Go, get out," she urged, fear and urgency bleeding into her voice. The man twisted violently beneath Ranger's weight, swinging fists, trying to grab the dog. Ranger growled, snapping again, dodging, forcing the man back. Mark fired a warning shot into the dirt, the report echoing through the clearing, startling the man. But the captor didn't stop. He lunged at Ranger again, teeth flashing, fury in his eyes. Mark didn't hesitate. He dove in, tackling the man to the ground. They crashed into a patch of dirt, leaves and stalks scattering. The man thrashed violently, fists flying, clawing, desperate to escape. "Let her go," Mark shouted, voice strained. "You're done." The man snarled, grunting, eyes wild with fear and rage. He swung at Mark, connecting with a punch to the shoulder. Pain flared, but Mark kept his balance, restraining the man. Ranger barked furiously, snapping at the man's arm, forcing him to release a grip that had been reaching toward Emily's mother. Emily screamed, pressing herself against her mother, terror flooding her tiny body. "Mom, don't let him." Mark's chest heaved. Years of training, years of experience, but nothing had prepared him for this raw, desperate violence. The man fought like a cornered animal, untamed, unhinged, every movement fueled by fear and obsession. Then a shift in the clearing caught Mark's attention. Another rustle deliberate from deeper in the corn. Something else, or someone, was moving, watching, waiting. Ranger growled, low and guttural, muscles tensing further, sensing a threat Mark couldn't yet see. The man seized the moment of distraction. He twisted, throwing Mark off balance, and lunged toward Emily's mother. "She's mine!" he screamed, claws outstretched, eyes wide with lunacy. Mark roared, tackling the man again. Ranger bit at his heels, snapping, holding him back. The captor twisted, kicking, swinging, each motion filled with panic and desperation. Mark struggled to pin him, adrenaline surging, muscles straining against the man's raw, chaotic force. Emily clung to her mother, crying, "Stop him, don't let him take her." Mark tightened his grip, sweat mixing with blood and dirt, heart hammering. Every second was a battle, every movement a matter of life or death. Ranger snapped again, teeth flashing, forcing the man onto his back. Then, as the man attempted another desperate lunge, a sharp scream echoed from the shadows. Mark froze. Ranger stiffened. The cornfield seemed to hold its breath. Emily's mother grabbed Emily tightly. Don't look," she shouted, pulling her daughter back. Mark's eyes darted toward the source of the noise. From the deeper corn, another figure emerged, a shadowy shape moving with intent. Something about it made his blood run cold. Ranger growled, teeth bared, ears forward, hackles raised. The man saw it too. His eyes widened in terror for the first time in years. "No, no, not her," he shouted, voice cracking, backing away from the shadow. Mark's heart raced. Whatever had entered the cornfield was more than just the man. They weren't alone. Something ancient, something dangerous, something unseen was watching, waiting. Ranger barked furiously, snapping at the invisible threat. The man's panic turned to irrational fury. He lunged at Mark again, swinging wildly, but Ranger intercepted, biting and holding him back. Dirt flew, stalks cracked. The clearing became a maelstrom of violence and fear. Emily screamed, pressing herself into her mother's arms. "Mom, help!" The captor stumbled, eyes darting toward the corn. His focus was torn between Mark, Ranger, and the unseen presence moving closer. Fear replaced fury, panic overtaking madness. Mark seized the opportunity. He pinned the man to the ground, holding him down with every ounce of strength, forcing him to the dirt. Ranger circled, growling, snapping at the man's attempts to escape. Then the shadow emerged fully, a tall, hulking figure, indistinct, moving with a predatory grace through the corn. Its presence alone seemed to warp the air, bending stalks and shadows around it. Mark's breath caught. He had never seen anything like it. Emily whimpered, pressing herself against her mother. What is that?" she whispered. The man shrieked, eyes wide in terror, clawing at the ground. "No, get away from me." Ranger barked again, low and furious, as the figure advanced. Mark realized they were cornered, trapped in a small clearing with a crazed captor and something else lurking unseen, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The clearing felt smaller, the shadows longer, the air heavier. Every instinct screamed danger. Every movement could trigger disaster. And then, as Mark struggled to hold the man down, Ranger let out a sharp, commanding bark, teeth flashing. The shadow froze. The man's eyes widened in primal fear. Mark realized in that moment, they weren't just fighting the man anymore. Whatever had been hiding in the cornfield had finally made its presence known, and it was hunting them. Emily screamed again, clutching her mother. Ranger growled, circling, eyes fixed on the shadow. The man thrashed violently, screaming, panic overtaking all else. Mark tightened his grip, muscles straining, knowing they had seconds, maybe less, to act before the unseen threat attacked. The shadow advanced, slow, deliberate, silent. And just as Mark braced for the strike, the story cut to silence, leaving only Ranger's growl and Emily's terrified scream echoing through the cornfield. The cornfield pressed in from all sides, shadows twisting like living things. Mark's lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he couldn't afford to falter. Ranger stood tense, teeth bared, eyes locked on the crazed captor thrashing beneath him. Emily clung to her mother, her tiny body shaking with terror, every whimper piercing Mark's heart. And then from the dense green maze it emerged. The shadowy figure Mark had glimpsed in the clearing took shape, a massive man, disheveled but undeniably human, with eyes that glinted with a strange recognition, like he had been waiting for them for years. He moved with impossible stealth, stalks parting like water around him. Mark froze, realizing the horrifying truth. The cornfield itself had a witness, someone who knew the captor intimately, someone who had been tracking him all along. The captor shrieked, eyes wide with panic. No, not him. Ranger growled, hackles raised, circling between Mark and the captor. The dog's intuition had always been uncanny, but now it was something more. Ranger sensed the figure, the hidden threat in the cornfield, and responded with a primal awareness that sent shivers down Mark's spine. "Who are you?" Mark shouted, voice tight with urgency, keeping a hand on his gun while holding the captor pinned. The figure stepped into the clearing, sunlight catching his ragged face. His voice was low, commanding, yet familiar. "I've been waiting for him to make a mistake," he said. His eyes flicked to the captor, then to Ranger, a knowing recognition passing between man and dog. Mark realized in that moment that this was no ordinary man. This was someone connected to the captor's past, someone who had been tracking his crimes for years, living in the shadows, waiting for the moment to intervene. The captor lunged again, desperate, thrashing violently. Ranger snapped at him, forcing him back. Mark tightened his grip, muscles straining, sweat and dirt mixing, heart hammering in his chest. "Stay down," Mark shouted, but the man beneath him had lost all reason. Rage and panic fueled his movements, every motion chaotic, violent. Suddenly, the figure in the shadows moved with lightning speed, intercepting the captor with a force that sent him sprawling. The man hit the ground hard, groaning, stunned. Ranger barked, circling, ready to strike again. Mark's chest heaved. Who are you?" he demanded, though the answer didn't matter right now. The immediate threat had shifted, controlled by this mysterious figure, a guardian who had been lurking unseen. Emily's mother clutched her daughter, tears streaming down her face. It's okay," she whispered. "We're safe now." But the captor wasn't finished. With a guttural scream, he lunged toward Emily's mother, rage and desperation twisting his features into something monstrous. Ranger leapt, teeth snapping, and the mysterious figure moved faster than humanly possible, blocking the man's attack with a forceful shove that sent him crashing into the corn. Mark realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Ranger, the captor, and now this figure, a web of instinct, violence, and precision that had been building for years. The cornfield itself seemed to hum with tension, every stalk vibrating with the energy of the confrontation. The captor scrambled, wild-eyed, trying to regain his footing. "No, she's mine. I won't let you take her," he shouted. Mark's hands tightened on his gun. "It's over," he said firmly, though the captor's eyes held a madness that made him hesitate. "It's over now." Ranger growled, circling, ready to strike again. Emily clutched her mother, trembling as the mysterious figure advanced, eyes cold and calculating. Then, in one swift motion, the captor lunged again, this time at Mark. Ranger intercepted immediately, teeth snapping inches from the man's arm. The figure moved in tandem with Ranger, a precise, coordinated strike that forced the captor down. Mark saw an opening and tackled the man, pinning him fully to the ground. Sweat poured down his face, muscles screaming, but he knew he couldn't let him go, not now. Not ever. Emily's mother knelt, cradling her daughter. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're really safe now." The captor struggled, but the combined force of Ranger and the mysterious figure kept him restrained. Finally, His strength ebbed, exhaustion and fear overtaking rage. His eyes darted between Mark, Ranger, and the figure, finally realizing that he had lost. Mark looked at the figure who stepped back into the shadows, fatting like a ghost. His voice was calm, commanding, yet filled with a quiet intensity. "He won't hurt anyone again, not today." Emily clutched her mother, sobbing with relief. "Mom, we're safe." Mark exhaled slowly, letting his body relax for the first time in hours. Ranger sat beside him, chest heaving, ears perked, still alert. The cornfield, once a chaotic maze of terror, now seemed eerily quiet, shadows still bending slightly as if acknowledging the end of the battle. The mysterious figure disappeared into the maze of corn, leaving Mark and Ranger staring after him. He had come and gone like a phantom, ensuring the captor could no longer threaten anyone. Emily's mother hugged her daughter tightly, tears streaming. "Thank you," she whispered to Mark, her voice breaking. "Thank you for bringing us back." Emily looked at Ranger, eyes wide with awe. "And him, he saved us too," she said, pointing vaguely toward the empty shadows. Mark nodded, realizing that Ranger's instincts, combined with the unseen guardian, had been the difference between life and death. The cornfield had held secrets, yes, but it had also harbored protectors. The captor, now fully restrained by the arriving backup officers called in by Mark's earlier radio calls, was led away. He shouted and raged, but his strength was gone, his power broken. Ranger's growl followed him to the edge of the clearing, a final warning that no one would underestimate him again. Emily's mother turned to Mark. What was that?" she asked, voice trembling. Mark shook his head. "I don't know, but whatever it was, it made sure you were safe." Emily hugged Ranger tightly. "You're amazing," she whispered. The dog wagged his tail slightly, ears still alert, eyes intelligent and knowing. Mark looked around the cornfield, still thick with shadows, still whispering with secrets. He knew they had survived something extraordinary, something almost beyond explanation. The danger had passed for now, but the memory of this day, the terror, the courage, and the unseen forces would stay with him forever. The family embraced in the clearing, sunlight filtering through the corn, illuminating hope after 7 years of fear. Ranger sat nearby, vigilant, protector, and hero. And in the shadows, the mysterious figure watched one last time, then vanished into the maze, leaving the cornfield to its quiet, waiting for the next story. Mark exhaled slowly. The nightmare was over, but the story, the real-life horror and courage, would echo in their hearts forever. Suspenseful, emotional ending. The captor is finally stopped. Emily and her mother are safe. Ranger and the mysterious figure emerge as heroes. But the cornfield remains a haunting, secret-filled labyrinth. A cinematic, memorable conclusion with lingering tension and awe.